I am Tommy Taylor, married to Fred Taylor, and the name of our company is the Fred Taylor Company, which consists of TransPower, the leasing company, and Chokey warehousing and real estate. We started our business, TransPower, in 1982 in Osceola, Georgia. We took over a small trucking company that was bankrupt. That's where we got our start. We moved into a big warehouse, and had been recently a corn warehouse. So I swept a lot of corn shucks for a couple of months until Fred could afford to hire a secretary, because my profession was not being a secretary. But that's where we got our start. And from there we went on, moved to Albany because the interstate happened and the trucks went a different route. And Fred was already in business with a partner in Albany. I think that happened in 1960. I did not know Fred when he was in the military. He finished school, no, in fact, he did not quite. He liked one course finishing at Georgia State before we moved to Alma.
Okay.
And he was with a trucking company.
I'm talking about when he was in the military, he worked with diesel mechanics, didn't he?
I never heard that. I mean, you can say that if you want to, because, I mean, I'll tell you quite frankly, I think that Fred's military is what made him the person that he was. And he worked in an office. And to tell you the truth, I think he was stationed in Texas one time. I think he was in Puerto Rico at one time. But I did not know him. We met at college, at South Georgia College. And of course, I was in my second year of college there, and he was coming in from service in Atlanta. He helped a professor write a book, because I used to go pick him up at night, and he would be sometime really late. Fred and I got married in February of 1956. He started his business with $50 that his daddy loaned him. When Marshall was born in Osceola, he was out, a truck had turned over, and he was out looking after that truck instead of looking after me. So I can remember that very well. When I talk about family and talk about mine and Fred's marriage, I always like to say that we both were reared in Christian homes and with real good principles. We were as good as everybody, but no better than anybody else. You know, everybody was God's children, and they were important. And so I think that's what made our marriage. Fred loved his employees. In fact, he would always call them his people. And sometimes I would tell him, well, no, they're God's people, not your people. But that's how he felt about them. He loved his people, and he loved working. The way he met George Busby was our lawyer. And they invited us to go to the church that I go to now. It was a small church then, but it's a big church now. And he and Mary Beth both were very active in the church. And so we started going to church there, and we became what I call kitchen friends. We were really good friends. And I'm sure that it was the encouragement from Fred, because as I say, he's always interested in politics, probably when he was a child. And because I know he helped a lot of people in Alma that ran for offices. So from there, we were just really good friends, and I think Fred encouraged him, because one of the interesting things about George Busby was that he was in the legislature. And, you know, back then, a lot of people did not have education. They couldn't even write, some of those elected officials. And George would stay up late at night helping them with their paperwork. And that was one thing that impressed Fred and I about him, you know, and I'm sure that was the encouragement. And of course it was a tough race. We almost didn't make it, but I think it was the Lord's will, because he was a good governor. And I said, well, Fred Taylor is working for free. I mean, he sort of moved in, and as far as I know, he did most of the hiring. You know, on his recommendation and checking people out and things. Yeah, he was very active for the first couple of years. Then, of course, he got, at that time, you could not run for 2 terms. It was just a 1 term. And Fred was responsible for getting that changed so that the governor could, you know, run again. And of course, George was a really good governor and didn't have any trouble winning the second time. In fact, it was very interesting, the year that George was elected governor, Jimmy Carter was elected president. And of course, it kept Fred and I busy because people from Washington, they would come down and we had to look after them, you know. And so that was busy. A lot of things I don't remember at that time because we were so busy in, you know, George's administration and the business. I remember that Senator Holloway died, and he was, well, we didn't expect it, you know, it was a little sudden. And so, Transpower, the only thing I remember about that, I remember that when Fred told me that he was going into the leasing company, I said, do you mean to tell me you're going to compete with Ryder? And I don't think he even answered me, because if he did, I don't remember what he said. But he was a very good businessman. Of course, you know, we love Chokey. It's a beautiful place. And that was one of the things that Fred enjoyed most in his later years was showing Chokey. And it is a beautiful place. When we first bought Chokey, it was really run down because it was part of Cena at one time. And you know, that's back when it used to be owned by Haynes, but now I don't know. I think there's a group that owns it now. And it's Cena, and that's Haynes spelled backwards because that was where the name came from, was Mr. Haynes. And that's Cena spelled backwards. And, but the only people that Fred would invite to Chokey, other than friends that he wanted to show it off, was his employees. He wanted them to do the hunting, and customers and employees were the ones that hunted on it for, until Mark and Marcia decided they might want to sell the hunts, but that didn't last very long. Because it was, you know, when you charge people, they're hard to get along with. So we don't do that anymore. It's gone back to customers and employees.